The BMD Podcast, anytime you want. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host on Major League Broadcasting, that's MLB. We are back on the YouTube channel today with an honored guest. Certainly a friend of the show. We have interviewed him numerous times. This is our first Zoom call. Everybody say hello to Chief Stacey Laforme. He is head statesman of the Mississauga Tribe and the first new credit mission. I believe I've got that right, or has it changed since we last talked?
It's changed a little. First off, let me say it's a pleasure to be here. I enjoy talking with you. I've changed. It's no longer Chief Laforme. It's Giima Laforme. So Giima is our word for talks for the people or leads people. So it's more closely associated with who we are, because Chief was a name bestowed by, not our own people.
Okay.
Yeah,
so do people still call you Chief, or that's totally changed?
They're getting used to it. I don't mind, because it's just Giima is more appropriate, but Chief is something that I don't mind people using until we get used to Giima.
All right. Now, when did that change come about? Because last time you and I talked, about a year ago, it was still Chief.
Yeah, well, I got to thinking about all these teams that are removing offensive names and stuff that have been over the years, and I thought, well, I'm going to get on this. The fact that we're not chiefs, we're leaders or speakers for our people, so we're Giimas in the Ojibwe language.
Okay, and Giima is D-E-M-A?
G-I-I-M-A.
Giima.
Giima.
Yeah. Giima. Okay, well, I haven't got the pronunciation correct, but listen, we're happy to have you on as usual. You're looking fabulous. Tell us what you've been up to, catching up. What are you doing? What are you working on?
well,
stuff that you can talk about.
Well, that's all we can talk about. Lots. There's so many different things that we're doing here, right? But one of the main things that has interrupted our daily lives, as it has for everybody, is the COVID and the virus and the isolation. Here in my community of the Mississauga of the Credit have about 2,600 members, 850 on reserve. The Mississauga Nation has 10,000 members. But here in my community, we have about 800 on reserve, and we did very well. We only had 2 cases, and they were recovered early, and we haven't had any more since, because the nation really pulled together. I've often said this, as there are a lot of communities in the world, and a lot of them are close. But the fact is, the Indigenous communities have an advantage, because those communities are largely made up of families. And so when they pull together, it's families pulling together. Even when outside communities pull together, it's still, good friends and good neighbors, but it's not family. So when First Nations do that, they have that added extra protection, and they need it, given the impact the virus can have on Indigenous people.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned diabetes and blood pressure. Is that the curse that is traveled with the Indigenous community? Is that everywhere?
Well, I can't say it's everywhere. A lot of people still live a good life and live life similar to what we lived many, many years ago. But for the majority of us, interacting with Canadian society, European society, our lifestyles changed, our food changed, and our bodies simply were not used to it. And so diabetes and high blood pressure became a way of life for a lot of our people. We haven't had the decades to get used to the food and the diets that your people might have had. And so that's been problematic. One of the positive things in the past has always been that cancer statistics in people, in Indigenous people, seem to always be lower than normal society. But over the past few years, I've noticed that we've caught up and surpassed Canadian society in any number of areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little disheartening, but yeah.
How are things working out with the government? Not to be on specific things, but how are the relationships with the government? Last time we talked, you were very happy how things were moving provincially and federally. Are you still comfortable? Or are you still got the hands up and fighting your way through?
Well, that's interesting. I think that the fact when you deal with the government, whether it's the Canadian or the federal or the provincial, they have their ideas and their agenda, and we always have our ideas and our agenda. And as long as the two match, hey, everything goes along smoothly. But once you have a departure in idealism, and then you have to start figuring out how you're going to make your way through those other governments that exist in the land. So it's always challenging. For the most part, I'd say we've been fairly successful with this federal government and doing a lot of projects and getting a lot accomplished in our First Nation. Access to capital and different things have been fairly well with the federal government. And so we're hoping that continues. A lot of people in the past have asked me, do you think Justin Trudeau was sincere when he said all those things about Indigenous people being the most important relationships and all those other things he said right out of the gate?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it doesn't really matter if he was sincere or not, because of that statement, we've opened doors, we've opened windows, we've had opportunities, we've made relationships on the ground with universities, with colleges, educational institutions, different levels of government, different organizations and unions. All those things have happened and more quickly due to the fact that you had a prime minister coming out and making these bold statements. Now, I kind of think he was sincere in what he was saying. I also think he had, to be brutally honest, I think he had no idea how to accomplish that.
Right.
And therein lies the rub on the whole thing. You have to handle expectations, right? If you come out and say, I'm going to do this, this, and this without timelines and dates and a strategic plan, people are going to get upset when that doesn't happen immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that's problematic. So,
what about your duties? Tell the viewers your duties as the top statesman of the community there. Tell us your 9 to 5 when you wake up. What's on your schedule, your catalog? What do you have to deal with? Give us maybe a general your 9 to 5 daily routine. I know it's longer than 9 to 5, but people understand 9 to 5, and maybe educate the viewers, what it's like in the life and times of Stacey Laforme.
Well, and every day when I get up, I try to, do a smudge. A smudge is one of our ceremonies to cleanse our spirit and our mind so that we can, face the world in a better state of mind and health. And so I do that. Try to do that every morning, and that's usually, in the past it's been about 5 or 6 in the morning, but lately with COVID, I've got to admit I've been getting up around 8, so I slept in a little bit. But then I would check my agendas, and usually I have several meetings throughout the day, and most of them are by Zoom now, and so I don't have to wear shoes if I don't want to, or socks, or quite frankly pants if I don't want to, but I do. So just so you don't worry about that if I stand up.
Yeah.
But then it's it's off to meetings, it's off to phone calls, Zoom meetings. That goes on throughout the day. Through the course of the day, I may have 100 emails to answer or get back to people, set up appointments, those types of things. Meet with other counselors on other projects. Look at our governance structure, what we're trying to change, the way we're trying to revamp our organization. We're trying to improve our government. We're trying to get away from the Indian Act. We're trying to put in our own peacekeepers. We're changing the system around CAS in our First Nations. So all that things is on top of the what you would consider statesman duties of meeting with mayors and politicians and prime ministers and all that other stuff. The real work is, that's valuable. Don't get me wrong. Having those relationships and partnerships is immensely valuable to us because we have now when we're moving towards our own governance, we have other institutions who will help us, like educational institutions who can provide resources. So it's very valuable for us. So my typical day is ends around maybe 7 or 8. And then on the weekends, I have, let's see, this past weekend, I had one in-person meeting, 2 phone calls, and a Zoom meeting on Saturday. And Sunday, I did a couple of videos for updating a community on COVID. And another one was a greeting for Massey College, I believe, or maybe it was a different one now. But anyway, those are sort of every day. On the weekend, it sort of slows down, but it's more Zoom meetings or introductions or things like this.
How about family support? You've been in the community, I'm guessing, over 20 years now, working your way up the ladder to become the top boss. What happens with the family interaction, with your time commitment? Do you have time for family?
That's a good question. The role of when I was a counselor and I've always lived here in the community. I moved off for a few years, but lived just outside of the First Nation. So I've always resided here. And I was a counselor before I became chief for about 15 years. And when I was a counselor, I was busy, very busy, but I didn't have to be the face that was out there in the public all the time. I could rely on other chiefs to do that, and I could work behind the scene. So I had more time for family. On the weekends are basically mine. I would have every Saturday we would do a large family breakfast and things of that. Then I became the Giima, or the chief, as everybody knows it, and the life changed. It's there's no time for this and that, and there's no time for family breakfasts very much anymore. All that kind of thing is sort of suffered as you take the responsibility of being a Giima. I think that you can make it what you want it to be. I mean, if you're a leader of First Nation, or if you're a leader in government, you can be as busy or not as busy as you want to be. There are certain commitments that you have to make, and there are others that you do it because you see the need or you love it. But I could pull back and not do videos like this. I could pull back and not do all these welcomings for, I did two welcomings to 2 universities in the last little while. They were both about law, right? And so I could pull back from those types of things, but they have value. Those building and keeping those relationships has value. I believe that as the First Nation Giima chief in this area, who has treaty lands across, southern Ontario, a lot of the GTA area, that we have a responsibility not only to my nation, but to all the people who live and play on our lands. And that's part of being out there and seeing how you can help and how you can form relationships to make things better for everybody. Now I know I'm a poet.
Oh, yes.
And well, people call me a poet. I call myself a storyteller. But the interesting thing was when I did an opening for one of the law schools, the first year law school, I think it was Ryerson, starting their law school up there in Toronto. And they're good people, by the way. They have a nice relationship with us. They've helped us out in the past. We've worked with them. So I said, yeah, I'd be happy to do a welcoming to your first year students. And when I was doing it, I did the usual welcoming and talking to them and different things. But it got to the point where I wanted to read a poem to them. And so I struggled. I said, well, there's so many things going on in the world. There's there's climate change. There's a damage to the earth. So I could easily do something that's about our mother, the earth. And then I talked about there's all the racism that's going on in the world right now. There's so many things we could talk about racism. I could easily do something about that.
Right.
And so I struggled with it, and I said, I'm going to do a story about a tree. And I said, now this may seem strange to do a story about a tree to a group of future lawyers, but I said I'm going to do it anyway. Now, this story came about because, as you may or may not know, there was a lot of hard work to save that tree, and they're a 150-year oak tree in Toronto.
Yes.
And it was very worthy cause. And they asked me, would you write a poem for us? It's going to go publication about this tree. And I didn't respond because I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. So before my speech at the school with the first year law students, I sat down and wrote a poem that was intended to answer this question about the tree. It certainly wasn't the story that I think they wanted to hear, but it was a story that wanted to be told. And I read it to the law students. And if you don't mind, I'll read it to you.
No, the floor is yours, sir.
It's simply called Stand. You call me beautiful, amazing. You argue to preserve my life. You will fight so that I may remain. Yet you only notice me because I've been called to your attention. Were I among my own in a field, would you even see me? They are killed in the hundreds, the thousands. Who defends them? Do you? They have just as much right to existence as I. The place I live does not make me special. The years that have passed do not make me special. The fact that you have noticed me does not make me special. I am special because I am special, because we are all special. I appreciate what you do for me, but it is not right if it is just for me. If you do not see this or understand this, then leave me in peace. Leave me to my fate, for I will not forsake the others for the love of myself or for the love of you.
Wow. Wow. Where do the words come to you? Where did
I
they
don't
come
know.
from?
I'm not sure. That, as I said, that one was
That was beautiful.
And to tell you the truth, I probably wrote that poem in about 10, 15 minutes. But I shouldn't tell people that in case anybody wants to ever buy one. I should say, I struggled for days and endless hours of work there. And
but how do the words come to you? Like they flow. I've said this to you numerous times when you've read stuff. Everything flows, everything works. Is it a dream? Are you chicken scratching on a piece of paper, or where's the idea come from?
I don't know. Sometimes it's suggested. There was this one time, my ex-wife sent me a text, and I was going to the casino, and it's a 35, 40-minute drive. And I got a text, and she said, your ex-father-in-law passed away, and I want to do something. I want you to write a eulogy or something for the newsletter or paper. And I go, okay, well, when do you need it? And she said, tomorrow. And I said, okay, let me try, and then I'll call you back. So I turned to my wife and I said, well, I got to do a poem for tomorrow for this man. And I said, you're going to have to write it while I tell it to you. So we did a poem, and it's in my book, Living in the Tall Grass. We did a poem. I can't remember the name now, but it flowed very easily and nicely. And by the time we got there, I typed it into the phone and we sent it to them. And it was really reflective of the man's life. He had a hard life and made some tough decisions. He lived on Skid Row for a while and turned his life around. And it was really about him talking to his friends about the journey he'd been on and how he hopes that they'll forgive him for the things he'd done if he's offended them, but thanking those that stood with him and beside him. And, and talking about, if he can't learn to forgive him, that's okay, because he's found that way to forgive himself, and that, he walks towards the light still, so it was actually a poem that was really, really fitting to him. And so, but I don't know how I came up with it in the moments that happened. It just happened. Sometimes poems take a long time. Sometimes it take a few months to write. You leave them, you put something down, you leave them, you come back, things of that nature. But some of them just come out, right?
You have a wonderful flow of the words. I've said this numerous times. I'm not pumping your tires.
That's okay.
If you were no good, I'd tell you you're no good. I think you would. I think you'd respect that honesty from me. But it just flows really nice. and you also have that voice that you want to listen, at my end. So, what's important to you right now, other than obviously health and welfare? What's important not only to you being the top boss, but what message are you trying to not only give to the community, but, you've always been a gentleman, I felt, that always wants people to listen to the wisdom. So what wisdom are you trying to share with the world, not just your own community?
Well, the biggest, that's a tough one. There's so many things that we're all learning. We're such a divided people by geography, you know, culture, heritage, and that division is so strong that we fail to see that we're all connected. Regardless of what spirituality you have, regardless, there is a common denominator among us. And one of the areas that we know this is that at one point in time, everybody in this world knew the value of our Mother the Earth because they depended on her, and she provided everything they needed. But as we got further and further technologically advanced, we forgot that piece. And so when people look to Indigenous people to help them protect the world now, I say, that's not my job. Well, maybe it is in part, but my job is to help you recognize that connection that you have. And everybody has it. Everybody has a connection to this earth, this world, somewhere in there. It may be buried deeper, it may be on the surface, but it's there. And that's a common denominator for all of us. Mm-hmm. And all the things that are going on in the world, all the trauma, the violence, the hate, and the disease that's going on, they're not separate and isolated incidents. They're all because we live in an unhealthy world. And when I say that, you can't have a healthy people if you don't have a healthy environment.
Interesting.
And fundamental principles are understanding who you are and who you want to be and moving that way. It's difficult because we've become so far apart, we can't imagine that we're actually related, in the core. So we've got to reconnect as people, as individuals, but also as historically, like my Mississaugas of the credit are part of the Mississauga Nation. We have to reconnect with the Mississauga Nation, the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, who we're part of. And then, and only then, when we understand who we are, can we start making those connections back to the rest of the world. And the same goes for whatever race you are. Make that connection to who you are, who you want to be, and then start joining together with others with the understanding that we share a common purpose and common principles. So those are things.
Do you feel life's lesson that you've learned from your forefathers and people of interest to you growing up as a young boy to the man you are now, the teachings, because your countrymen were here first? Do you feel that, to use a loose word, modern man has let go the real values of the first people that were here discovering this thing called Earth? And you made the point on technology. Have we lost sight of the original values?
I believe so. I mean, if you look at your own spirituality, you will see many of those connections are similar at one point in time about the earth and about respect and about well-being. Those things are common denominators across many areas of spirituality. But as we get more technologically advanced and move forward, we think that that's the most important thing. See, we get lost in the moment, right? Whatever moment we're in, we think that's it. And we neglect to step back and make sure that moment is in keeping with who we are and what we want to be. So if you're doing something this moment and it's not in keeping with who you see yourself as, how can that be a positive step forward for you, right? And I think we're all guilty of that, myself included, because I'll get wrapped up in a moment and forget because I'll want to win an argument, I'll want to make my point, I'll say something as I got to get here, but I'll forget to step back and think, well, wait a minute, none of this is about who I want to be or how I want to interact. And so it's important to always step back and make sure you understand if what you're doing in a moment is in keeping with who you are and who you want to be.
Wow. Well said. Well said, sir. Well said. I've always respected your views and values because I think you're a man that gets his message across. And I think, you know, as a team leader, community leader, I think if I was the voting man, you would be the vote. And I'm not pumping your tire. I've always been impressed that you make sense. You make good sense. And I respect the fact of your heritage, that you folks were here first, and you know. And I think that's the message to me that we aren't receiving enough of. And I think to grow spiritually and as a community, we have to listen to, let's say, the forefathers that were here first. And I get that message. So, you know, thumbs up to you. Listen, we're almost out of time. How can people connect with you if they'd like to hear more of the poetry? Can you give some of your social IDs out?
Sure. My email is Stacey.Laforme@mncfn.ca. You know, I have the book out called Living in the Tall Grass, which is probably now only available on online. I forget what that's called now. I'm getting old, so I can't remember the names of the technology myself.
That's fine.
And yeah, so I have a email, a Facebook. You can look me up there, talk to me. I'm open to that kind of thing. I enjoy meeting with people. I like Zoom, but I love the interaction you have with a live audience.
Oh yes.
You know?
Oh yes.
There's just nothing better than that interaction with people.
Well, sir, thank you for taking the time. Thumbs up as usual. Again, you were a champion in my eyes and my mind. Look forward to catching up again. Folks, you've been listening to me, the BMD, on our show segment, Major League Broadcasting, MLB, on the YouTube channel everywhere. And I'm going to say our coach of the day, our master coach, Giima Stacey Laforme. I know him as that. I'll have to take a while to get going to know him. You know, next time, sir, all the best to you and your family. We'll catch up again.
Yeah. Be heard, be safe.
Thanks.